This is the new H12R from AGT Industrial. We picked up a few months ago and I've just started using it, getting comfortable with it, and now it's time to service it. It has 2 hours on it and I want to change the engine oil and the hydraulic oil. But the only problem, well, one of the several problems, is you have to take a whole bunch of bolts loose from the inside to access this back panel. So today I am going to put some hinges on and some latches and cut the bottom off so this whole back panel will swing out and I'll be able to access the engine oil and the hydraulic oil. So I picked up these latches and they're very small from Amazon, and I'll throw a picture of them up so you can see which ones I got. And they'll go something about like that one there and then one down there. So what I'm gonna have to do is drill these holes out to 1/4 inch because I bought a bunch of 1/4 inch stainless steel hardware. So I'm gonna mark all of the holes on the Mini X and then drill those out, and then drill the holes out on the latches and go ahead and get those bolted up. That wasn't as bad as I was expecting. These clamps, the holes were already beveled, so running a 1/4 inch drill bit down, the drill bit self-centered and drilled the holes out pretty easily. So now I'm gonna take my Sharpie and mark on here where the clamps need to go, and then I'll take a center punch and drill some holes. All right, now I got the holes drilled for the main part of the latch. This metal is a lot thicker than this metal, and they're probably a little crooked. Be mindful of your drill bit going through and where you place your holes as opposed to what's behind there. And you want it far enough off of here where you can get a nut on the back side of this one, and then you want it far enough off this side to where you want a nut on the, be able to get nuts on the back of that side. So now I'm going to start mounting the 2 latches. Okay, I have both latches mounted. I used stainless steel button head Allen screws. I bought a pack from Amazon assortment, all 1/4 20, ranging from 3/8 or half all the way up to a couple inches. Came with stainless nuts and flat washers. Of course, no lock washers, so I had to buy those separately. But I use those so that way the head won't interfere with anything, and also you can get a wrench or you can get a Allen bit on there to tighten it up. If that was a regular hex head bolt, there'd be no way to get a wrench in there. That's the top. And on the inside, it's a little bit difficult to see because it's getting dark. Let me shine a flashlight. Right there's, you see the bottom 2, and there's the top 2, and that's what I was saying. There's that lip right there, so you want to make sure you're far enough away from that lip so you can still put a wrench on it. And as you can see, that metal is a good bit thicker. It took a few minutes to drill out the 4 holes. So now I'm going to mark where the other part of the latch goes and drill those holes and get those mounted. All right, so I got these mounted, and there's an adjustment, as you can see, the threaded part. So that way when I get it all together the way it's supposed to, I can adjust it. I can fine tune it. I thought about putting some double-sided tape down here, but leaving the one side of the protective on the tape so that way it would act as a bumper. We'll see how much it rattles once I get all this done. There's a little bit more curve through here than there is here, so I might have to kick this out with some washers right here, or kick this one out with some washers. As you can see, let me tighten it up. That actually might work. All right, so the next plan is to mount some hinges over here, and I'm gonna have to mount them in about the same spot to avoid anything from behind. Also, as far as like this side, I know I messed up this warning sticker that I have no idea what it means. I guess this tall guy is supposed to walk through this little door, something like that. Anyhow, it's getting dark, so we'll pick back up tomorrow or the next day. All right, so I went inside and got bored, so I come out here, try to mount these hinges tonight. So these are 3-inch hinges. So I measured from the edge right here over 1.5 inches, and then again down here, and I'm running a piece of tape. So that way when I mount the hinges, they'll be up against that tape like that, and both hinges will be level and square with each other. All right, now that we have the hinges loosely mounted with the bolts, flat washers, lock washers, and nuts, we'll go ahead and tighten them up and make sure they are square with the tape, and that way we can mark the other side of the hinges. 2 things to note: these hinges, they're 3-inch hinges from a hardware store, way overpriced, probably 10 bucks for a pair of 2 of them. Don't have to drill these out. 1/4-inch bolt fits in fine. And again, be mindful of what's on the back side when you're drilling. You wouldn't want to put a drill bit through the valve cover of the engine. All right, now that we have the main side of each hinge mounted, it's time to mark and drill holes on the other side. Another thing to note is these are cheap Chinese stainless bolts, and they're soft, and you can round off the inside of the Allen part of the bolt if you are not careful. So we're back at it today. I got the one side of the hinges bolted. I'm gonna leave these loose until I can get this back cut and then unbolted, and I can set it into place and put those bolts in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna draw a line along here and then cut it off with the cutoff wheel. All right, I got the line drawn. Now I will unbolt the back and put a piece of tape or a few pieces of tape on there to get some straight lines, and get the grinder with the cutoff wheel out and start hacking. those were six 10mm bolts, and with a 13mm socket and wrench. I dropped a couple nuts down in there, so when I get this back off, I will search for those. Alright, so this lip right here won't slide past this. It's closed. So I'm either going to have to cut it in place, which is going to be a pain in the butt with this, how it wraps around right there, or take the roll bar off in this plate, which should be 6 bolts there and 6 bolts there. So I've decided to go ahead and take the roll bar loose and see what happens after that. A couple of those bolts are pretty tight, so I'm gonna have to get a wrench and pop those bolts loose, or a 3/8 ratchet. Well, that worked out. So I'm gonna go ahead and bolt the roll bar, whatever it's called, back up and start to cutting. And just like that, we now have 2 separate pieces. I would definitely recommend wearing a respirator or a mask or something when cutting that metal. Alright, now I'm gonna put the rear cover in place, get the bolt started, and then hook the latches up nice and tight and get everything squared up before I tighten the bolts down. it opens kind of and closes, but I'm gonna have to trim this piece off right here. I guess it does sag a little bit. You can see the height difference between there and there. And this side, it wasn't as much of that. All right, I would call that modification a success. All right, now that we can access everything, I'm gonna go ahead and change the oil in this engine. There's the drain plug, and of course there's a cross member right underneath it, so it's gonna make a mess. We got a cut gallon jug down there to catch. Oh, I should put like a nipple in a ball valve, but I'd be worried that the ball valve would shake open and drain all the oil, so we're just gonna make a mess. I did go ahead and crank the machine up and move it to level ground and let the engine warm up so the oil will flow a little bit better. It's kind of cold out today, and this is a 12mm wrench. Yeah, it's gonna make such a mess. It's going in the bucket and on the cross member and under the engine. Engine oil looks a little glittery. So I want to go ahead and get it changed before I put too many hours on. All right, we'll let that drain and then clean the mess up and fill the engine up with some new oil. The oil that came out looked a little rough, and we're just gonna put some Walmart 530 conventional oil in it. Should take about a quart and a half. All right, so obviously I put the drain plug in before I put the oil in. It took almost a quart and a half of oil before it started running out. So we'll fire it up and make sure everything's good. All right, so I measured how much oil was in my drain pan, and it was right at a quart. So plus that, or that plus what I spilled, is about a quart and a quarter, quart and a third. So now we're gonna fire it up, turn the battery on, pull the choke out, even though it doesn't hardly work. Got the throttle down low. Everything looks good. Now we're gonna try to figure out how to drain the hydraulic oil. Now these are double acting cylinders. So when the cylinder is retracted, there's a lot less fluid in the cylinder than if it's extended. If it's extended, this is all up to the piston is full of oil. So we're gonna try to retract all of the cylinders as much as possible to get as much hydraulic fluid in the tank as we can. So I've got all of the cylinders retracted as much as possible. And here's the gauge. And you can see the two bumps that hold the thermometer on, and they say the hydraulic oil should be in the middle of those two bumps somewhere. So clearly mine is very low. So I'm gonna figure out how to drain the fluid and add some new AW42, or I'm sorry, AW46. All right, I know it's getting dark, but I went ahead and pulled the counterweight off. It was just 2 bolts. It sits on top of this plate right here and bolts there. So that way I can pop this hose loose and drain the oil, because that goes straight to the bottom of the tank. All right, so I took the line loose from the pump because it goes to the bottom of the tank, and it's slowly draining. So far we're up around almost 5.5 quarts. So we'll let this drain some more, try to get all of it out as much as possible, and then we will put oil in it. I think it'll take about 2 gallons. I bought a 5-gallon bucket. The hydraulic shop that I get some of my stuff from, I took them an empty bucket. I always use AW32 and all of the equipment I work on at work. I took them an empty bucket, and they filled the bucket up for 40 bucks, which is $8 a gallon, which is pretty cheap. So it was enough to do a fluid change on this twice. I'll change it now, and then I'll run it for a few more hours and then change the fluid again. So we'll let this drain, and I will hook that line back up to the pump with an adjustable wrench, and then I will put the counterweight back on. The counterweight, the socket I used on the bolt on the bottom was 1 3/16", and then I used an adjustable for the nuts. This counterweight's going to be kind of heavy and awkward to put back on by myself, but I think once I can get it up on that lip, I should be able to start the nuts and bolts. So we'll let this drain a little while longer. All right, I put the hydraulic line back on, make sure it was tight, put the counterweight back on. It was heavier than I was expecting and awkward, but once you get it up on that lip, nuts and bolts go in easy. And then I put hydraulic fluid in it, 46, and it was low, and then I added a little bit more, and it went all the way up to where the top of where it's supposed to be. So if it overflows, it'll just vent out the top, and I'll deal with it when that happens. So now we're going to crank it up and cycle the hydraulics. Turn the battery power on. Pull the choke out. Oh, I'd already turned the battery on. Now it's back on. play with it, move it around, cycle it, and check the oil, but everything should be good. All right, so the last modification I'm going to do is replace some grease fittings and go ahead and grease the whole machine. All of these cylinders have these little grease fittings like that take a little needle, and some people say that you should leave them because they're low profile and they won't get knocked off. But if these were good ones, it'd be different, but these are cheap Chinese ones. But like I said, all of the cylinders have these style fittings right there, right there, and right there. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull those out and match them up. They're metric. I bought this little grease fitting kit from Amazon. I'll leave a picture of it later. And then get these greased and then go through the whole machine, find other grease fittings like right there. And let's see. There was another. Right, there's one on the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these grease fittings swapped out and then get the machine greased up. All right, so I ended up replacing 8 of them. I forgot about this cylinder down here. And I ended up just using 8 by 1.0, 180 degree grease fittings. Bought a whole kit not knowing exactly what I would need. So if you wanted to save a little bit of money, you can buy just a pack of 8 by 1s. So now what I'm gonna do is grease these fittings and the other grease fittings I can find. Then I'll have to cycle the machine up and down to get grease fittings like that. So what I'm gonna use is my Milwaukee M18 grease gun. And inside of it, it's got red grease. It's not red and tacky or high temp wheel bearing grease. It's Mobile One synthetic. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit as many fittings as I can and then cycle the machine. All right, I went a little too far with it, but it is what it is. I can just wipe those off. Also, I remembered those 2 grease fittings right there. I think they go down to the swivel bearing up underneath there. Again, I still have a couple more, and I'm sure I'll keep finding more as I go. I'll cycle the machine and hit all the fittings again. There's a few more modifications or maintenance things I want to do to this. I want to make sure the tracks are tight, and I want to check on the choke cable, make sure that's good to go, and then after that probably install a cooler and a filter for the hydraulic system. But for now, this will definitely get me going. I appreciate you watching, and if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and like this video and subscribe.